Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond the limits.
Welcome back, everyone. If you haven't subscribed, please do so right now, as it will help us getting our show to others and help get to our next milestone. I hope your new year is off to a great start, but if it's not, it's about to be, as today I'm excited to be speaking with Jack Jackson. Jack is a seasoned executive with over 20 years of experience in the tech industry, known for his dynamic leadership and transformative impact on the organizations he's led. Jack is the author of the book, The Reaction to Inaction, a game changer for organizations of the future. Jack, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you for having me, Enrique. Definitely excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. And folks, we'll be speaking about the cost of inaction, how trusting employees drives performance and profit. But Jack, before we get into that conversation, tell us a little bit about you that maybe the audience may not know.
Yeah, thank you. Like you mentioned, 20-year tech executive, father of four. I like to say forever white belt in jiu-jitsu. And before going into the private sector, I worked in the federal government in the terrorism space and worked for the Department of Defense and those type of things. A lot of people don't know that about me. Received an award from the president here for my participation in the response, the government response for the attacks 9/11. And so that's a little bit of a personal background that not a lot of folks in the industry know about me.
Well, that's wonderful data. And thank you for serving in that capacity. I know both from the civil service side on DOD and the military side, I know we get into a lot of things that maybe the world may never know, but thank you for what you did.
Thank
Now,
you.
in your book, The Reaction to Inaction, you highlight the hidden cost of leaders not acting. And
Yeah.
we'll talk about that. How does failing to genuinely value and trust employees become a form of inaction that quietly erodes performance and engagement?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's really where the book was inspired and stems from. If you read the book, I kind of open up with the story about an executive. Now he's an executive, but back then, earlier in my career in the private sector, I kind of became friends with this employee that had been with the company for a number of years, lived, breathed the company, right? Really, really enjoyed the company, wanted to do right by the company. And our biggest customer had an issue. He spent 3 weeks going back and forth with management, just trying to get a simple concession done for the biggest customer there. At the end, it took 3 weeks. We ended up losing that customer. And not only did we end up losing that customer, I remember that day he walked up to me in the hallway with this look on his face. I said, "Hey, man, did you finally get that concession done? And is everybody happy?" He goes, "We lost the customer." And I just turned in my resignation. I'm leaving. And that was his reaction, right? And so in that moment, in that hallway, in front of those cubicles, I named the book right there. I said that is the reaction to an action. And that day, I pulled out my journal, my notepad, and began taking notes. And so in every meeting I had, I literally took one set of notes for those meetings and a second set of notes for the book. And not only hundreds of interviews with researchers and psychologists and professors and CEOs of the top 1,000, but that moment really, really solidified for me what the cost of somebody like that, how losing somebody like that who really cared about the company's mission and vision, what that inaction can do. And he went off to have a stellar career at a great Fortune 50 company. He's a highly, highly respected executive today, but they really had somebody special there. They just lost it due to reaction to inaction.
You know, that is such a powerful story. I mean, I could see this playing out in my head that you have a great person doing work, probably a great value to your business, but because of your inactions, they saw, hey, there's no room for growth here. There's no room for me here. And they chose to walk away. But kudos on that individual to recognize it, right? Because you mentioned, hey, fruitful somewhere else, very successful somewhere else, which it could have easily been there. But sometimes recognize or realize that when we don't act, there are people watching. And sometimes it'll cost us that way. Now, when employees feel trusted rather than managed, what specific shifts do you see in ownership, decision making, and discretionary effort? And how do those shifts translate into measurable business results?
Yeah, I mean, again, 18 years of writing this book. I mean, I think I've done incredible amount of research, and only that now you're talking about real life in the field, in practice results, right? And you're looking at somewhere between 30 and 50% improvement on innovation, on market share, on growth, on employee satisfaction. You're lowering attrition by 30, 40%. I mean, that right there alone, just employee attrition alone is just incredibly expensive, right? The brain trust leaves, all the things that you have to do to train employees, reorient employees, fill them into the company culture, interviews, all the time wasted replacing those employees from attrition, all because you didn't build a culture of high performance, inclusion, empowerment, and all those kind of things. I mean, it's really sad. And then on the results side of things, man, I mean, you're seeing companies right now in the field practicing both in the private sector and the public sector. I mean, we're really talking about, big Fortune, 100 companies, both private and public companies that are both small and large, implementing the framework that's inside the book, that are seeing incredible results. I'm getting calls from CEOs right and left saying, "Hey, I'm shocked." I've got VPs and directors calling me last week saying, "Hey, Jack, man, my one-on-ones have changed. They're just more fruitful, more valuable. We're having more open and honest conversations." And so they're seeing growth not only on the bottom line, right? They're seeing the revenue grow, they're seeing faster products to market, but they're also seeing innovation, customers sat scores go through the roof, and employee sat scores going through the roof. People seem more open and trustworthy, so they in turn they return that favor to their employees.
And, we mentioned the trust in people. We also know that being valued is a thing that we look for as team members. And many leaders say they value their people, yet their behaviors often tell a different story. So, what are the most common gaps you see between intention and action? And
Yeah.
how can leaders close that gap in practical, everyday ways?
Yeah, Enrique, it's a great question, and I think it's something that says everything. And I'm a pretty direct, kind of almost a brutally honest person, right? Me myself, I've gone off to these $100,000 retreats a week, executive team. We're at a resort, we're at a ski resort, we're at a hotel on a beach somewhere, and we're sitting around and we're doing, kind of leadership, professional development, right? We're drinking good food, having great wine, and we're sitting around talking about how do we become better leaders. You have this person come in at probably 50 to $100,000 a whack, coming in and doing their little consulting, kind of system of, kind of professional development, leadership development, coaching. And in reality, we go out of that room, man, we had some great food and great wine, and that's really what we take away from it. You go back into the office, you go back into the field, you go back to your team, and you've learned some ways to have better one-on-ones or better communication, or talk a little bit about company culture and inclusion or empowerment and those things. But if your team doesn't know what you're talking about, it's really hard to get everybody on board, right? And even more importantly than that, what happens if that manager leaves? Let's say that manager really takes that professional development to heart and really tries his hardest to implement, he or she, and then leaves. Then what happens, right? You got a big, huge knowledge gap there, and again, nobody really can build anything off of that. And my book really tries to take that out. I think in all the media I've done on Fox News, I think I said it on Apple TV, I think I said on the Aaron Mullen show, I said it, I'll say it here. I mean, this book has been coined the consultant killer, the coach killer. I mean, let's take those consultants out. Let's build a framework and a system, is what my book offers, and says, let's build a framework and system that no matter who's managing the organization and no matter who's at the bottom of that individual contributor level, everybody can work within this framework. Everybody can feel empowered. Everybody can innovate. Everybody can return that American business dominance back inside of their organization.
And talking about empowerment, from your research and experience, how does empowering employees with autonomy and trust influence innovation and adaptability, especially in organizations navigating uncertainty or rapid change like AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And AI is something we really got to touch on. It's interesting. There's a person who's kind of the founder of an organization, nonprofit called Gold Star Gamers, and I encourage everybody to go take a look at it. And I called her up. She's a psychologist, and she focuses on helping children who lost their parents in the battlefield, right? And it's just an amazing organization. I called her, I kind of told her the idea of the book and what I'm trying to accomplish, and she pointed me to reminded me of this great research that came out, I believe it was Harvard, maybe, or Stanford, and it talked about a schoolhouse with children. And what the study showed was when you have a schoolhouse with children and no fence, they still very close to the schoolhouse. They don't feel very safe, and so they don't wander, they don't take chances, they don't go out and play. But if you put a fence, let's say 500, 1,000 yards around that schoolhouse, those children will venture out all the way to the end of that fence, right? They feel safe, they feel comfortable, they can go out there, be creative, and play. Well, it's the same kind of thing with the book, right? I built these spheres of influences that really say, hey, look, everybody's within that schoolyard fence, right? We just all have different fences, all these spheres of influences. So whether you're an individual contributor all the way to the CEO, we all have these spheres of influence that we can act, we can innovate, we can be creative, we can fail responsibly, we can make decisions quickly and fast that are better for the company, better for the customer. We can innovate, we can be high performers without having to worry about that inaction, right? And part of that, the reward for that is higher performance, better customer satisfaction, better employee satisfaction, work-life balance. You feel like you're part of something. You feel like you're part of something. You don't want to leave the company. You feel like what you do, whether you're individual contributor or CEO, what you do matters. What you do, you're part of something bigger. You find out that employees buy into the vision and what the company's trying to accomplish more. You realize the results are shown in the field, that these employees feel like they own part of that business. They are part of the bigger picture. Whether it's a small company who's using my framework today or a Fortune 50 publicly traded companies using my framework today, they are seeing those same results. Employees seem just happier at work. They feel like they belong. They feel like they have value. They feel like they can speak up and honest. And the exciting part about that is it changes all the dialogue in the office. It changes all the dialogue with your manager. It changes all the dialogue with your coworkers. Now you can go into a room and you can walk all the way to the end of that fence and try some new things and throw out some ideas without being reprimanded about it. You can fail fast without being in trouble about it. And again, the framework is just such a wonderful way to build an organization.
Now, for those that are looking at this from a financial, fiscal type of responsibility point of view, for those leaders focused on the financial performance, what evidence or examples most clearly show that investing in trust, empowerment, and employee value isn't just a good leadership thing, but a strategic advantage with real ROI?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question, and that's really something fundamentally that makes sense, right, in the business. So it's interesting as you look at the landscape of business today. We went through this world of just excess, right, in the '90s and early 2000, where it was just excess and spending, expense reports, and expensive dinners and lunches, and just this crazy amount of spend. And then the pendulum went the complete other way, and then it became a data-driven managed by Excel spreadsheet type of a business. And then you saw the quiet quitting. You saw the quietly people just leaving the company, losing valuable employees, losing that brain trust, losing the cultures of companies. Everybody went back in. And then during COVID, everybody went home and nobody really wanted to go back into that office. And you lost productivity, you lost innovation, you lost growth. It cost a lot more money. Teams were not collaborating like they're supposed to. People were doing second and third jobs on the side because they didn't feel like their job was stable. And so what happens to a company when that kind of culture seeps in is you have lower performance, you lose customers, you lose the competitive advantage. Strategically, the roadmap isn't clear for you over the next, 12 months, 16 months, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You really don't know what's going to happen because you have really nothing that you can ground the company in. And that grounding really comes from trust, it comes from empowerment, it comes from being dynamic and moving. And to touch on artificial intelligence, I spent a good 18 months deep diving 10, 12 hours a day into the artificial intelligence world. I mean, I interviewed at the top of the industry artificial intelligence experts, not only on the technology side, but really on the theoretical and philosophical side of what this is doing and how is this going to impact the employees today and of the future. And really, this book grasps that. This book says, hey, look, artificial intelligence isn't a replacement, it's a team member. You should embrace it, you should leverage it, and you should use it. But not only that, in these spheres of influence, it allows you to do just that. It allows you to take advantage of all the tools that you have today. And not only do that, but feel confident and feel comfortable in the role that you're in and the role that you want to be in. And what does that do? That turns that bottom line. It makes you a super more productive company, which makes you super more competitive, which means your shareholders are happy, the stakeholders are happy, the board is happy, and more importantly, your team and your employee and your company is happy. And I think at the end of the day, man, the numbers speak for themselves. I talked to a number of CEOs of companies that you and I both know and read about all the time, and they're going, Jack, we're implementing this slowly in small parts of the organization, and holy cow, man, it's unbelievable. We're saving money. We're not worrying about employee attrition. Customer sat scores are going through the roof. Employee satisfaction going through the roof. We feel really, really good. And not only that, on the product side of things, right? Whether it be tech or healthcare, whether it be manufacturing food, automotive, it doesn't matter. What you're seeing is people are taking chances to be innovative. They're saying, hey, why don't we try this solution instead of that one? Whether it be in customer service, support, customer success, whether it be in marketing, sales, whether it be in production, finance. Why don't we do this with the numbers? Why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? They're really being creative and innovating because why? They feel trusted and empowered. They're part of the bigger vision.
Yeah, and I tell you that a lot of conversations around AI, often I hear, hey, don't be afraid of AI taking your job. Be afraid of somebody who knows how to harness AI
Yeah,
taking your job, right? Another person. But
yeah.
we can talk about this all day. But I know that you have your book and you have other things that you are participating in. So, what do you have coming up, and where can the viewer or the listener follow or support you?
Yeah, fantastic. First off, connect with me on LinkedIn, Jack Jackson, the reaction to inaction on LinkedIn, on Barnes and Noble. It's available on Barnes and Noble, bookstores are everywhere, obviously on Amazon as well. And I would love for you to follow me on Instagram at Jack Jackson Speaks. I've got book signings everywhere. We're doing some of the biggest book signings in the world over the next 12 months. So look for me there. I'm going to be doing some great media spots at different news outlets as well, talking about the book and really talking about how, the world should be looking at artificial intelligence from a leader's perspective. There is chaos in the boardroom, right? Everybody's throwing money at the tech stack, everybody's throwing money at the technology, but nobody's really understanding how to figure out how do you lead? How do you lead an organization in the age of AI? This book addresses that, and it's probably the biggest top of mind issue on CEOs and boardrooms across the world.
Absolutely. And folks, we're going to have all the links necessary for you to go ahead and follow Jack and his work, and maybe join him at one of those book signings, which would be great. Want to remind everybody that today's episode is sponsored by the Global Trends Magazine, the Outlier Project, Bone Frog Coffee, Castle and Compass Adventures, Ascend Meditations, Chop AI, and Boomcaster. And if you enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know by leaving a comment. Tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.